It was the kind of rain that didn't just fall, it invaded. Heavy sheets slamming the pavement, soaking into concrete, sliding down glass like the world had sprung a leak. I sat in the back of my Bentley, watching it blur the city I owned. My phone buzzed with urgency. Tokyo was already waiting on Zoom, the board was restless, and the markets were shifting. But my eyes weren't on the screen. They were on her. Not the waitress. Not yet. Her. My mother. She sat under the rusted Lexington Avenue awning in her old wheelchair, the hood of her coat clinging to her white hair, thin shoulders curled in, like she was trying to disappear inside herself. Her gloved hands clutched the armrests like she was gripping the last bit of dignity she had left. I'd only meant to leave her for 10 minutes. Maybe 15. The diner was familiar to her. She used to bring me here as a boy, when the bills were overdue, but she still wanted me to feel normal. Now it was a pit stop. I had business. Real business. Millions in motion. Lives in motion. I told myself she'd be fine. But as the rain picked up, so did something else in my chest. Something I hadn't felt in a long time, shame. And that's when I saw her, the waitress. She must have been closing up. A lean woman with tired shoulders, wiping down counters while the rain screamed outside. The clock said 10:48 p.m. She saw my mother. Her hands froze mid-wipe. And without hesitation, I mean none, she dropped the cloth, pushed through the door, and jogged into the storm. No umbrella. No jacket. No calculation. Just instinct. She knelt beside my mother and placed her hands over hers, speaking softly. I couldn't hear through the glass, but I could see it, the gentle tilt of her head, the way she checked her coat for a dry corner and placed it over Mom's knees. It was like watching an echo. A memory. My mother had done that. Years ago. For me. I watched as the waitress, Serena, I'd later learn, wheeled my mother inside like she was someone worth saving. And I just sat there. Like a coward with tinted windows. The rain made the world gray, but inside the diner, the light was gold. Warm, nostalgic, flickering like a heartbeat. I could see them both through the steamed-up windows, Serena bustling behind the counter, and Mom settled near the radiator, thawing. Her face was soft now, less rigid. She looked content. Maybe even happy. I couldn't remember the last time I saw her look like that. Not at the gala. Not at the penthouse. Not even at Daniel's last birthday. Just there, in a rundown diner, eating soup from a chipped bowl. Serena placed a blanket over her shoulders, then brought a cup of something, tea, I guessed. She wasn't smiling to be polite. She wasn't doing it for a tip. It wasn't even duty. It was decent. Old-fashioned, inconvenient, unmonetizable kindness. And it made me furious. Not at her. At myself. My phone buzzed again. Tokyo was on hold. I let them wait. Nora, I said into the speaker, calling my executive assistant. Get to the Lexington diner. No suits. No heels. I want eyes on the waitress who brought my mother in. There was a beat of hesitation on the other end. She knew better than to question tone like that. Yes, sir. And Nora? Yes. Be discreet. The thing about power is that it insulates you. From consequence. From guilt. From being made to feel small. But as I watched Serena tuck a napkin into my mother's lap, I felt microscopic. I had built an empire. Holt Dynamics. $1 billion tech juggernaut. But I'd missed dinner with my mother 3 times last month alone. I had optimized everything. Except before being a son. I didn't know much about Serena Carter then. Just what I could observe. She moved like someone who'd spent years on her feet, not slouching, not sluggish, just efficient. Her skin glistened with the sheen of overtime, her hair pulled back in a fraying bun that said she cared about function over fashion. Her eyes, from what I could see through the window's distortion, were alert, but not bitter. She reminded me of someone I hadn't thought about in years, my mother, before age turned her voice into a whisper. Serena sat down with her. Not to rush her. Just to talk. Listen. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw something I hadn't expected. My mother was laughing. Laughing. I leaned forward in my seat, stunned. And ashamed. That laugh, the soft, wheezy giggle, was something I hadn't heard in years. At the holiday fundraiser last December, she'd smiled for the cameras, but her eyes had been hollow. At my IPO bell ringing, she'd clapped politely, but I could see the distance in her. I thought that was just age. Now I wondered if it had been grief. The grief of being left behind by the son she raised with trembling hands and unconditional faith. When Nora arrived, I didn't turn to greet her. I just pointed at the window. That one, I said. The waitress. Nora followed my gaze. You want her background? Everything. She won't know what hit her, Nora murmured. I shook my head. That's the problem. She already did something that hit me. Nora raised a brow. You believe in debt, not charity. And she just put me in hers. Half an hour passed. I didn't leave. I just sat there, watching Serena refill Mom's tea, wrap her shawl tighter, and scribble something on a napkin, maybe a note or a smiley face. I watched my mother reach out and touch her hand. I hadn't seen that gesture in years either. Serena responded not with surprise, but warmth, like it was nothing new for her to matter in someone's life. That was the final cut. I rolled down the window just enough to let the cold air slap me. I needed the sting. I needed to feel something besides pride. Then I did what I hadn't done in a long time. I closed my laptop. Not just the screen. The whole damn machine. The ride back was silent. My mother doesn't speak much these days. But that night, as the Bentley hummed through the city, she whispered something. She has kind eyes, she said, barely louder than the rain still drumming the roof. I turned, met her gaze in the rear view. She reminded me of someone, I said softly. Your grandmother, she replied, smiling faintly. Always had an extra plate at the table. Even when there wasn't enough. I swallowed the guilt. And kept driving. At home, I carried her to bed. She was light. Lighter than I remembered. Before I left the room, she reached out, touched my hand. Thank you for coming back. I froze. Because she didn't mean tonight. She meant, from wherever I'd disappeared to. Maybe that diner had more than just hot soup. Maybe it had reminded us both of who we used to be. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling of my penthouse, surrounded by silence worth millions, and I kept seeing that booth by the radiator. I'd built skyscrapers, crushed mergers, and restructured economies. But I hadn't been the man who ran into the rain. Serena Carter had. I didn't sleep that night. Even with blackout curtains and million thread count sheets, even with the soft thrum of climate control and the hum of 29 stories of silence beneath me, I lay there, eyes wide, haunted not by nightmares, but by something quieter. Something more unsettling. Regret. It didn't shout. It whispered. Whispered things like, you left your mother in the rain. You watched someone else give her what you should have. You, with all your billions, couldn't spare 15 minutes to offer a blanket. I kept seeing her, Serena. The waitress. The way her hands moved, instinctively. The way she met my mother's needs was not with obligation, but tenderness. And damn it, she reminded me of someone. Not just my mother. But the women my mother used to work with. The women who raised their kids alone, cooked dinner with government cheese, and still found it in themselves to help a neighbor. Women who had nothing left to give, but gave anyway. And Serena Carter? She was one of them. By morning, Nora had sent the full report. Serena Carter. Age, 34. Occupation, waitress at Lexington Diner, 10+ years. Status, unmarried, no children. Education, GED. Residence, West Fayette Street Apartments, Unit 3B. Income, approximate, $24,000 per year. Race, African American. There it was. I didn't need the bolded word. I already knew. I'd seen it in the texture of her hair, the curve of her cheekbone, the quiet pride in her posture. I'd seen it in how quickly she shifted from warmth to wariness when she thought someone might take advantage. There was a time, decades ago, when my mother taught English in a mixed classroom on the east side of Baltimore. I remember her staying late to clean chalkboards, to tutor the kids no one else would bother with. One of them, a dark-skinned girl named Patrice, used to braid Mom's hair at recess. I asked why. My mother said, because love speaks in hands before it ever speaks in words. I hadn't thought about that girl in 30 years. Until now. Serena Carter lived on the 3rd floor of a building that should have been condemned. I knew the type: peeling paint, broken intercom, windows that never quite shut. It was the kind of place where dreams sagged like tired laundry on rusted fire escapes. I didn't belong there. And that's exactly why I went. I knocked once. No answer. I knocked again, firmer. From inside, the shuffle of feet, the creak of tired wood, and then, finally, a voice. Who is it? I cleared my throat. Raymond Holt. A pause. Long enough to feel it. Then, what do you want? To talk. Another pause. Then I heard the chain unlatch, and the door cracked open, just wide enough for one sharp brown eye to study me. She looked exactly as she had the night before, no makeup, no pretenses. Just sweatpants, a loose hoodie, and hair pulled into a frizzy knot. Except now, her guard was up. Way up. You're the guy from the car, she said. Not a question. I nodded. I am. She opened the door a little wider but didn't invite me in. And you were watching us? Yes. She stared at me like she was weighing whether to slam the door or call the cops. I raised my hands slightly, palms up. Not for the reasons you think. Is that so? I'm not here to complain that you fed my mother. I'm here because I don't believe in charity. Her brows pinched. And what the hell does that mean? It means I believe in debts. She folded her arms. So what, you think I owe you now? No, I met her gaze. I think I owe you. She let me in. Reluctantly. The apartment was small, too small for someone with a heart that large. The kitchen table was cluttered with unopened bills, grocery lists, and half a crossword. A framed photo of an elderly woman sat on a shelf near the window. Her mother, I guessed. Or grandmother. Someone she missed. She didn't offer me coffee. Didn't ask me to sit. I did anyway. She leaned against the counter, arms still folded, and narrowed her eyes like a woman who'd seen enough of the world to know when it was trying to trick her. So, what exactly do you want, Mr. Holt? I set the envelope on the table. She glanced at it but didn't touch it. What is that? A job offer. Her laughter was short and incredulous. You show up at my door with an envelope and expect me to what? Bow down and say thank you, Masa. The words weren't angry. They were exhausted. I exhaled slowly. I'm not offering pity. I'm offering respect. She tilted her head. Rich men don't respect women like me. Then maybe it's time one of them did. She stared at the envelope again. Didn't move. I could see it, the war behind her eyes. The tug of war between pride and survival. Between everything her mother taught her about not trusting power, and everything her bones screamed about needing a break. Why me? She finally asked. Not curious. Suspicious. I answered the only way I knew how. Because you saw her. She didn't respond. You didn't know who she was. You didn't care. You treated her like a human being. That's rare. She still didn't respond. I leaned forward. I run a company that builds empires. But we've lost the human part. The people part. And you, somehow, reminded me of that in 5 minutes with a cup of soup. Serena rubbed her arm absently, still staring at the envelope like it might bite her. And what would I be doing? Running your coffee machine? No. You'd be working with me. Directly. Communications. Strategy. Outreach. She snorted. You've got a team of Ivy League blondes who would kill for that job. I don't trust them. And you trust me? I trust what I saw. She picked up the envelope. Didn't open it. Just felt its weight in her hand. 6 figures, I said. Benefits. Security. She laughed again, bitterly this time. My mama used to say, rich folks don't give without wanting something back. She was probably right, I admitted. And what do you want? I didn't flinch. Someone who sees what I don't. She didn't say yes that night. But she didn't say no either. I took that as a win. When I left, I turned back just once, caught her at the window, watching me go. Not curious. Just cautious. Like someone waiting to see if the world would betray her again. The next morning, she showed up at Holt Dynamics. Wearing a department store blazer, a pencil skirt that didn't quite fit, and heels that clicked just a beat too slow. Every head in the lobby turned. Not in admiration. In evaluation. She didn't belong. And she knew it. But she walked like she did. I watched from the upper floor, hands clasped behind my back, jaw tight. Serena Carter was about to enter a world that chewed people like her up before breakfast. A world where being black, working class, and female was a trifecta that most didn't survive. But she had something they didn't. A moral center that couldn't be bought. A backbone forged in double shifts and rent notices. And a kind of quiet strength that didn't need permission to exist. When she entered my office, I didn't offer a smile. She didn't expect one. You're late, I said. By 2 minutes. I nodded. That's 2 minutes I don't get back. She dropped into the chair across from me. You want me here or not? I studied her for a moment. Then I said the first honest thing that came to mind. That remains to be seen. Something is unsettling about watching a person walk into a building you designed to keep people like them out. Every inch of Holt Dynamics was crafted for precision, control, and excellence. Marble floors. Acoustic glass. Temperature is controlled to a precise 71 degrees. No noise. No clutter. No room for variables. And then Serena Carter walked in, a human variable in worn-out heels. She didn't flinch. She didn't pause. She didn't ask where to go. She just walked straight toward the front desk with her chin lifted and her eyes ahead, like she had nothing to prove. That alone proved something. Nora didn't hide her skepticism. She never did. When Serena stepped into my office for her first official day, Nora stood beside the glass wall, tablet in hand, expression cool. She scanned Serena the way she would a quarterly report, searching for liabilities. Her eyes caught the fraying hem of Serena's skirt. The barely there sheen of drugstore lip balm. The tired but unyielding posture. "Miss Carter," Nora said, her voice smooth as ever, "welcome to Holt Dynamics." Serena nodded. "Good to see you again, Ms. Winters." There it was. The jab. Subtle, but unmistakable. Nora's eyes flicked, just once, then returned to me. "I've prepared the orientation materials." "I'll handle them," I said, not looking up from my screen. Nora hesitated. Then nodded and left without another word. Serena turned to me, lips curled in the faintest smile. "You two always this warm and fuzzy?" I didn't answer. But I filed away the observation. Quick wit. Noted. I slid a file across the table. The Orion Group. Multinational. Looking to move our logistics offshore to cut labor costs. Serena skimmed the brief. Her eyes sharpened. "How many jobs would that kill?" "About 600. In Baltimore?" I nodded. She leaned back. "They're not just numbers." "No. And you want me to stop it?" "I want you to convince them to take a deal that keeps the jobs here. Without bleeding us dry." She stared at me. Hard. "You want me to walk into a room full of white-haired suits, half of whom think I'm here to pour their coffee, and get them to change their minds about a decision that's already saving them millions?" "Yes." She smiled faintly. "You don't like easy wins, do you?" "No." She tapped the file. "Good. Neither do I." The first meeting was a disaster. Not because of Serena. Because of everything else. The boardroom was cold. Always is. Designed that way. Keeps people on edge. Makes them pliable. 3 executives from Orion Group sat at the far end of the table, all in dark suits and smug entitlement. Philip Langford, the lead negotiator, barely looked at Serena when she entered. Didn't stand. Didn't nod. Didn't even acknowledge her presence. She took a seat beside me anyway. Uninvited. Unintimidated. Langford opened his folder, sighed like he had better things to do, and said, "Let's make this quick." Serena didn't blink. I watched her hands under the table. Still. Calm. Like a bomb that hadn't decided when to go off yet. Langford launched into a monologue about market volatility, labor efficiency, and maximizing shareholder trust. He used the word streamline 5 times in 3 minutes. Serena let him finish. Then leaned forward. "Funny," she said, "how every time we talk about profit, it's always other people's jobs on the line." Langford blinked. "I'm sorry." "No, you're not," she said evenly. "But let's pretend you are. Let's pretend you give a damn about the folks who clock in at 5 a.m. to pack your shipments. Because when they lose those jobs, they don't get severance. They get eviction notices." Langford's smile tightened. I held back a grin. This was a war zone. And Serena had just fired the first shot. After the meeting, I found her alone in the East Side corridor, staring out at the city through 30 stories of glass. Her reflection was faint beside mine. You didn't hold back, I said. I didn't know I was supposed to. You weren't. She glanced at me. Langford's not going to back down, is he? Not easily. She nodded, quiet for a moment. Then, you ever fire someone who didn't deserve it? I didn't answer right away. Because the answer was yes. Many times. Once, I said. Her lips twitched. She didn't believe me. But she let it go. Over the next week, Serena worked like she'd been born for this. She met with HR, legal, comms, and labor unions. She spoke their language and translated it into ours. She rewrote memos, rearranged messaging, and prepped talking points that sounded like they came from real people, not lawyers in suits. She had a way of walking into a room and making people forget what they expected her to be. Because she wasn't just articulate. She was authentic. One day, I found her eating lunch with the janitorial staff in the break room, same fold-out table, same vending machine coffee. She didn't do it for show. She did it because she belonged there. And that scared the hell out of some people upstairs. Nora came to me that Friday, arms folded, brows tight. She's making waves, she said. She's doing her job. She's not like us. Good. You trust her too fast. Do I? She frowned. You didn't even know her a week ago. I met her eyes. And yet she fed my mother with her last slice of bread. That shut her up. For a moment. Then, and what happens when that kind of loyalty is tested? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. Not yet. The next Orion meeting was different. Langford walked in prepared to bulldoze us. Instead, Serena met him with a spreadsheet. Not numbers. Stories. Line 12, she said. That's Maria. 30 years with the company. Supports 3 grandkids. No pension. You outsource, she's gone. Langford scoffed. Serena didn't budge. She turned the page. Line 18. Darnell. He works night shifts. His wife's on dialysis. His paycheck keeps her alive. Langford looked annoyed. Serena looked unshaken. Finally, she dropped the hammer. You want to cut costs? Fine. But don't do it on the backs of people who gave you decades. Restructure the top first. Start with executive bonuses. Reinvest the difference. Langford turned red. I leaned back. And smiled. That night, I called my mother. She didn't answer. She rarely did. Her memory was slipping. Some days were better. Some days she called me Charlie, my father's name. But I left a voicemail anyway. Hey, Mom. I met someone. She reminded me of you. Fierce. Kind. Doesn't take crap from anyone. You'd like her. I hung up before my voice cracked. When I stepped back into the office, Serena was there. She looked up from a folder. Everything all right? I nodded. She looked at me longer than necessary. Have you ever talked to her about how you grew up? My mother? She nodded. No. Not really. Why not? I shrugged. She lived it. Why retell it? Because sometimes, Serena said, people want to know they mattered. Her words hit something in me I didn't want to name. A week later, Orion caved. Not all the way, they never do. But enough. The jobs were saved. The cost was restructured. The press release landed like a miracle. And Serena? She didn't take credit. She just went back to her desk like she hadn't just rewritten the future. That night, I poured myself a drink I didn't need and stood by the window of my office, watching the lights flicker across the harbor. And I thought, she did more in 1 week than some VPs do in a year. Not because she was hungry. Because she cared. About things most of us had forgotten to care about. About people. About dignity. About consequences. And suddenly, I realized. I hadn't hired her out of generosity. I had hired her out of debt. Because somewhere, in some small corner of my soul, I didn't like to acknowledge. I wanted to believe I could still do something right. There's a silence in power. Not the kind you hear, the kind you feel. It hums beneath the surface of every boardroom conversation, every polished smile, every measured breath. A silence built on unspoken rules, centuries of codes wrapped in language like fit, presence, executive maturity. And when someone breaks that silence, the whole machine notices. That week, Holt Dynamics noticed Serena Carter. And it didn't know what to do with her. She had barely stepped out of her third successful internal meeting when I started getting the first phone calls. She's bold, one VP told me, which was corporate speak for she doesn't shrink when I talk over her. She's not exactly traditional, murmured a division head, meaning she doesn't look like us, sound like us, or worship at the altar of MBA groupthink. Nora didn't call. She just walked into my office and placed a sealed envelope on my desk. Anonymous feedback, she said. I opened it after she left. Words like unqualified, inexperienced, and inappropriate attire swam in lazy ink across the page. Not one mention of her results. Not one acknowledgement of what she had already accomplished. Just the old whispers, dressed in new suits. She had only been here 3 weeks. 3 weeks. And already, they were sharpening their knives. I watched her one afternoon in the courtyard, the only slice of green in our concrete temple. She sat beneath a birch tree, balancing a salad on her lap, laughing with a junior developer and one of the mailroom clerks. They laughed back. Not politely. But fully. Genuinely. She had bridged the invisible walls between departments without even trying, or maybe because she never saw them as walls to begin with. I leaned against the glass window, arms crossed, and watched them. The low-wage workers, the overlooked talent, the people we all pretended didn't exist unless they made a mistake. And Serena? She saw them. She always saw them. It was her gift. And I was starting to suspect her curse. That same evening, I called a surprise all-hands for upper leadership. I wanted to test something. The conference room was filled with tension before I even entered. There were murmurs, tight smiles. Eyes flicked toward Serena when she took a seat beside me at the table's head. She wore a navy blazer this time. Slightly better cut. Her shoes still weren't high-end, but they were polished. Still, they saw what they wanted to see. Outsider. Interloper. Experiment. I saw the difference, though. She didn't shrink. She expanded. I opened the meeting. Serena Carter will be leading the strategic alignment for our community engagement division. Effective immediately. A silence dropped, like a book thudding on a marble floor. Serena turned to me, eyes slightly widened. She didn't know this was coming. I didn't warn her. Because I needed her to see what they'd do next. One VP, Arthur Hemmings, mid-50s, Harvard tie still practically strangling him, cleared his throat. Raymond, I appreciate the initiative, he said carefully, but community engagement doesn't traditionally report through executive strategy. I kept my voice even. It does now. Another voice piped up. Will she have oversight on the budget? Yes. And hiring? Yes. A long pause. Then a cold smile from the end of the table. Well, someone muttered, let's hope she's up for it. The meeting ended. They filed out slowly, some avoiding her gaze, others offering brittle half-smiles. She remained seated, quiet, fingers resting lightly on the table. I didn't speak. I waited. She finally turned to me. You just painted a target on my back. No, I said softly. They painted it the moment you walked in the front door. I just lit it up. She exhaled. Why? Because I don't put people in rooms to play safe. She studied me. You put me here to shake things up. I put you here to remind them what a conscience sounds like. Her eyes flicked to the door. It's gonna be a long fight. Yes, I said. But not a losing one. The following weeks were like watching glass crack beneath pressure. Quiet. But spreading. Serena began assembling her team. Not by poaching from within, but by reaching beyond. She brought in a retired social worker to consult on program accessibility. She hired a former factory supervisor to advise on workforce transition plans. She even invited a local community college student, a woman in her 40s returning to school, to sit in on strategy sessions. The exec scoffed. I smiled. Because what they didn't understand was, Serena wasn't building a department. She was building a bridge. And the people on the other side? They were ready. Still, the backlash came. Of course it did. An anonymous memo circulated about lowering standards. A joke email chain passed through internal threads mocking her working-class charm. Someone left a post-it on her office door that read, "Back doors on the loading dock." She brought it to me without a word. Just placed it on my desk. I looked at it. Then at her. Her expression was unreadable. But her hands, they were clenched. I've got broad shoulders, she said. But I won't pretend I didn't see it. I nodded. Then picked up the phone. Security reviewed camera footage. We found the culprit, a mid-level account manager. Young. Entitled. Arrogant. I fired him by noon. No appeals. No severance. Serena said nothing when she heard. She didn't have to. The next morning, someone left a cupcake on her desk with a post-it of their own. You matter. Thank you. Anonymous. Nora pulled me aside the following week. She's winning hearts, she said. But she's ruffling feathers. I sipped my coffee. Feathers grow back. Hearts don't. She watched me for a moment, then said something I didn't expect. I didn't think you had it in you. What? Hope. I smiled, just barely. I didn't either. There was one final moment that sealed everything. We hosted a town hall with staff, something we hadn't done in years. The idea had come from Serena, of course. People can't feel heard, she'd said, if they're never given the mic. The hall was packed. Custodians sat beside coders. Receptionists are beside analysts. And Serena? She stood on that stage, no slides, no jargon, and told them why they mattered. She told them she had sat where they sat. That she had mopped floors, served tables, paid bills with quarters, and still found time to dream. And then she said, I work here now because someone saw me when I thought I was invisible. And I promise you, I see you too. The applause was thunderous. But I didn't clap. I just watched. And wondered. When was the last time I inspired that kind of faith in anyone? After the crowd dispersed, I found her backstage. She was leaning against the wall, sipping lukewarm water, face flushed with adrenaline. "You lied," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "You said you weren't a speechmaker." She grinned. "I'm not. I just talk like I mean it." I nodded. "You know they'd follow you anywhere, right?" Her expression turned serious. "Then I'd better make it worth it." That night, as I locked my office and turned off the lights, I walked past the lobby where Serena's reflection still lingered on the marble. She didn't just enter our world. She was reshaping it. And somewhere deep in my bones, I knew. Whatever debt I thought I owed her, it had just doubled. Every empire eventually resists reform. Even the ones built by men who thought they could control the weather. The storm didn't begin with thunder. It began with a whisper. A vibration. Barely perceptible. The kind of thing most people would overlook, an email forwarded one too many times, a line of data that didn't belong, a hush in the hallways when you entered a room. But I had built my life on pattern recognition. And I knew. The silence was back. And this time, it was circling Serena. She had just come back from a community outreach visit, glowing, despite the exhaustion. There was a light in her eyes that day. The kind that says something is working. That all the struggle, the stares, the whispered doubt, maybe it's finally paying off. I saw it as she sat down across from me in the Monday morning leadership huddle. A quiet confidence. A rare thing. A fragile thing. And by Tuesday morning, it was gone. It started with a report. Leaked. Confidential. Financial. Internal. It had been sent to the press anonymously. Exposing internal discussions about restructuring bonuses and slashing executive perks to protect lower-wage jobs. The optics were volatile. Stock took a hit. The board panicked. And the metadata? It pointed to one name. Serena Carter. Nora was the one who brought it to me. She didn't speak when she entered. Just laid the printed email on my desk like a grenade. I didn't touch it. Just stared at the header, a forwarded file, rerouted through 2 servers, originating, apparently, from Serena's company email address. I didn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. But belief had little to do with it. I looked up. Who else has seen this? The board. Legal. Half the 3rd floor by now. My jaw tightened. Does she know? She does now. I found her in her office, the light dim, her back to the door. She didn't turn when I entered. The paper was already in her hand. I didn't send it, she said flatly. I know. She turned. Her eyes weren't angry. They were tired. Disappointed. And something else, something more dangerous. Wounded. You hesitated, she said. I didn't. You hesitated when you walked in. I exhaled slowly. Serena, the board. To hell with the board, she snapped. I don't work for them. I work for you. That struck deeper than I expected. She stepped closer, holding the paper like it burned. I've done everything you asked. I've done more. I've sat in rooms full of men who think my worth ends at the hemline of my skirt. I've carried the weight of your conscience and their fears, and now, I'm the traitor. I never said that. You didn't have to. Silence stretched between us like a wire pulled taut. Then softer, almost a whisper, do you think I did it? I met her eyes. And for one breathless moment, I faltered. No, I said. But the board does. We both knew what that meant. In a place like Holt Dynamics, being innocent was never enough. Truth was irrelevant when perception could do the damage. I'd seen it happen. Hell, I'd made it happen, sacrificed employees to keep the waters still. People whose names I barely remembered. But Serena wasn't just another name. And the waters were already rising. That afternoon, I watched as she walked down the hallway. People moved out of her way, not with hostility, but with avoidance. The kind that says we liked you until it became inconvenient. She kept her head high. But I saw the slight tremble in her hands. I called Nora into my office. We're going to find out who sent it. She raised an eyebrow. You mean you are? No. We. A pause. Then, to my surprise, she nodded. We traced the file path through every firewall, every login, every access point. We cross-referenced timestamps, user IDs, and location pings. It took hours. Then days. Serena never stopped working, even as the whispers grew. Even as meetings were suddenly rescheduled. Even as the lunchroom went silent when she entered. Even as she overheard two executives murmur, I guess everyone has a price. She didn't respond. Not out loud. But her spine stiffened. Her silence became her shield. And then, finally, we found it. An unregistered device. Accessed through a cloned email domain routed through an external proxy. The source? Eric Calloway. Senior VP of Corporate Strategy. 10 years at the company. White. Polished. Unimpeachable. He had a motive. He had access. And now, he had exposure. I walked into Serena's office holding the proof in my hand. She looked up from her desk. Said nothing. Just waited. I placed the folder in front of her. She opened it. Her eyes scanned. Slowed. Then locked. I knew it, she whispered. Are you ready? She looked at me, eyes steel. I was born ready. We didn't wait to be summoned. We walked into the boardroom together, unannounced. The directors were seated already, murmuring, adjusting ties, trading glances. Eric sat 2 seats from the head of the table. Confident. Smug. Untouchable. Until Serena dropped the folder in front of him. This, she said, is a full trace of the leak. It includes device IDs, access logs, and even screenshots of the fake domain you used to frame me. The room froze. Eric's smirk wavered. This is ridiculous, he said, voice cracking. I spoke next. No, Eric. This is over. The fallout was immediate. Legal was involved within the hour. Eric was escorted out by security. Serena stood tall the entire time. Not triumphant. Not smug. Just steady. Like someone who had learned to expect betrayal, but chose to stand anyway. Later that evening, we stood on the rooftop terrace, the city lights flickering like distant stars below us. She leaned against the rail, her coat wrapped tightly, her breath misting in the cold. You could have let them bury me, she said. I stepped beside her. I've buried enough good people in my time. She turned. Why didn't you? I looked out over the skyline, the empire I had built. And whispered. Because this time. I finally had someone worth fighting for. There's a kind of silence that happens before everything explodes. Not loud. Not anxious. Still. Too still. The kind of silence that tastes like steel in your mouth and dust in your throat, the stillness before a building crumbles. The boardroom was full that morning. Full of neckties and smirks, of laptops clicking open and old men pretending nothing was wrong. Eric Calloway was already seated when I entered. He didn't look at me. He looked through me. As if everything that had happened, the folder, the trace, the accusations had been swept aside in the wash of his arrogance. He thought the machine would protect him. He thought Holt Dynamics would, like always, reward familiarity and expel discomfort. What he didn't know was, the machine had changed. Because the woman standing just behind me, she wasn't the exception. She was the beginning of a new rule. "Miss Carter," said Thomas Rydell, the board chair, nodding toward the seat across from him. "I assume you know why you're here." Serena didn't sit. "I do," she said, her voice clear but not raised. "But I assume you also know that what you're about to do is a very expensive mistake." A ripple moved across the table, a twitch of a lip here, a cough there. She reached into her leather folio and placed a stack of printed documents on the table. "This is a trace log," she said calmly, "from your servers. It documents access to a classified report sent to the media last week. You've probably seen the fallout already, the press frenzy, the dip in stock, the wave of questions." She slid the papers toward them. "What you haven't seen, until now, is the proof of who did it." Eyes dropped to the pages. Lines of code. IP addresses. Server names. Timestamps. A trail. Unmistakable. And at the end of it, one name. Eric Calloway. Eric tried to laugh. It came out wrong. "This is absurd," he said, his voice too tight, too fast. "This is a performance. You expect us to believe." "I don't expect you to believe anything," Serena said, her tone still even. "But our legal department will. And so will the press. And the employees who trusted this company not to let politics decide punishment." Eric stood. "A bad idea." Everyone saw it. His face had gone pale, jaw clenching. "This is retaliation. She's fabricating." "She's not," I said flatly. All eyes turned to me. "I've seen the logs." Nora verified the digital trail. "There's no fabrication. Only truth." Eric stared at me. I stared back. And for the first time in a decade, I saw the man behind the polished shell. Not powerful. Just desperate. "I demand counsel," he said. "You'll have it," I replied. "From prison, if necessary." A collective intake of breath rippled down the line. I turned to Rydell. "Effective immediately, Eric Calloway is terminated from his position. Legal proceedings to follow. And I'll personally testify to his attempt to frame a fellow executive for corporate espionage." Rydell blinked. He had always played neutral. Always floated with the tide. Now, there was only one direction to flow. He nodded. "So noted." Eric's chair scraped the floor. The sound was sharp. Final. Security entered quietly. One on each side. Eric didn't protest. Not because he accepted it. But because he didn't yet understand how he had lost. He glanced at Serena once, sharply, like maybe this was still salvageable. Maybe he could say something, spin something, or blame something. But she didn't meet his gaze. She just turned her back. And sat down. The boardroom emptied slowly. Some directors nodded toward me. Others nodded toward her. No one spoke. Not yet. The silence wasn't a victory. It was recalibration. They were trying to figure out what came next. Serena sat there for a long while after they left. Not triumphant. Not satisfied. Just still. I didn't interrupt. She finally broke the silence herself. They wanted me gone. Yes. Still do. Yes. She looked up. Her eyes were different now. Not hard. Not cold. But, tempered. Like iron pulled from flame. I'm not going anywhere. I know. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. You didn't have to back me. I met her eyes. Yes, I did. She tilted her head. Why? I paused. Because this moment mattered. Because words mattered. Because I built this place to run like a machine, I said. And machines don't think. They calculate. They protect what keeps them running. She waited. But you reminded me, I continued, that companies are built of people. And people deserve better than systems that only recognize them after they bleed. A long pause. Then, softly. You don't talk like a CEO. I wasn't supposed to. That night, I drove across the city, past the glass towers and lit up skylines, past neighborhoods I hadn't set foot in since before my first million. I parked outside a small brick building with crumbling edges and a flickering lamppost out front. The Lexington Diner. The sign still buzzed faintly. The seat by the radiator was empty now. But I could still see my mother's shawl resting on the booth's edge. The way Serena had draped it. The way she'd knelt in the rain. I sat in that booth for the first time in 30 years. Ordered tomato soup. Didn't finish it. Just sat there, staring at the window, watching the city breathe. The next morning, the staff on the third floor came in to find a new poster on the break room wall. No one is invisible. Underneath, a single quote in simple black font. I work here now because someone saw me when I thought I was invisible. And I promise you, I see you too. Serena Carter. No one took it down. Not that day. Not ever. 2 days later, Serena stood at the podium during an internal press conference. Calm. Grounded. Unapologetic. She didn't just address the leak. She reframed the narrative. This isn't just about one mistake, she said. It's about what we accept as normal. About who we protect and who we sacrifice. She looked out over the crowd. I was accused because I was visible. Because I made people uncomfortable. Because I didn't come from the places you're used to drawing your power from. A hush swept the room. But I'm still here. And I will stay. Because someone has to be, for everyone you stopped seeing. No applause followed. Not because they didn't agree. But because some truths are too heavy for clapping. That night, I visited my mother. She was weaker now. Her memory was fading like old film. But when I entered her room, she smiled faintly. You look tired, she said. Running a company. Her eyes twinkled. The company, or yourself? I chuckled. Bit of both. She reached out, her hands smaller than I remembered. I had a visitor today. Oh. A young woman. Kind eyes. Strong hands. I froze. She said her name was Serena. I swallowed. She held my hand, my mother whispered. Told me she remembered how I liked my tea. A pause. Then softer, she reminds me of the women I used to teach. The ones who carried more than they were ever meant to. I sat beside her. Took her hand. And for the first time in years, I said something I hadn't let myself say. Thank you, Mom. For seeing people. Even when no one else did. Her eyes fluttered. But she squeezed my hand back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, watching the city lights dance on my ceiling. And I realized something simple. Something terrifying. This company was no longer mine. Not in the way it used to be. Not in the way that let me run it with cold detachment. Now it had a soul. And her name was Serena Carter. We don't always notice the moment something breaks. Not when it shatters. But when it gives way quietly, like a door that used to creak, and suddenly doesn't open at all. That's how it felt with my mother. There wasn't a dramatic collapse. No ambulance. No final gasps with hands clutched to her chest. There was just a call from her nurse. She's quieter today, the woman said gently. She's not eating much. She's slipping. Slipping. The word felt cruel in its softness. Like something that could be undone if I just moved fast enough. But time doesn't slip backward. Only forward. And sometimes, all you can do is try to hold on long enough to say what you didn't know you needed to say. I brought her flowers that evening. Not store-bought roses. But wild violets. From a florist who still wrapped them in brown paper and tied the stems with twine. She always loved violets. Said they reminded her of little hands trying to hold sunlight. She was asleep when I entered the room, her breathing shallow, chest rising and falling beneath the soft weight of a wool blanket. The window was open just a crack. Enough to let in spring air and the sound of wind brushing tree branches. I sat beside her and waited. No laptop. No phone. Just silence. The kind that doesn't ask you to fill it. She stirred an hour later. Her eyes opened slowly, and for a moment, they didn't find me. Then they did. A flicker. A spark. Raymond, she whispered, smiling faintly. You look tired. I laughed softly. Always. Her hand reached for mine, brittle fingers, cool skin. I wrapped my palm around hers gently, as if trying not to crush something sacred. I brought you flowers, I said. She turned her head slightly. Saw them. And her eyes glistened. You remembered. Of course. No, she said, not the flowers. You remembered me. I couldn't speak. The lump in my throat wouldn't let me. So I nodded. And sat there, holding her hand, while the sun dipped low behind the buildings. Later, I found myself outside again, on the curb, beside the Bentley, unable to get in. I leaned against the passenger door and let the night wash over me. My mother was dying. Not today, maybe. But soon. And I had spent decades running so fast that I forgot what stillness sounded like. Forgot the way her laugh used to fill small kitchens with life. Forgot the sound of chalk on a blackboard when she taught grammar to kids no one believed in. Forgot the stories she told me before bed, about women who held empires together without anyone ever knowing their names. And somehow, in forgetting her, I had started to forget myself. The next morning, I walked into the office early. Too early for meetings. Too early for Nora's quiet judgment or Serena's steady gaze. I needed the silence before the storm. But when I opened my office door, she was already there. Serena. Sitting at the window, holding a mug of coffee between both hands. She didn't flinch when I entered. Just looked over. I figured you'd be here, she said. I raised an eyebrow. Early. Couldn't sleep. Me neither. She sipped. Then nodded toward the window. You okay? I hesitated. Then sat beside her. No. Long pause. Then, she's fading. I know. I don't know what to do, I admitted. Serena's voice was low. You don't have to do anything. That's not how I operate. She looked at me, not like a subordinate, but like someone who had seen behind the curtain and refused to look away. Maybe that's the problem. We sat there for a while. Just breathing. No solutions. No strategy decks. Just the knowledge that grief doesn't ask for permission. It just moves in. Unpacks. And waits. Later that day, Serena walked into my office with a proposal. A literal one. Titled, The Holt Initiative, Building from the Bottom. It outlined a mentorship program for first-generation college students. Executive leadership training for blue-collar employees. Rotational shadowing for support staff across every department. And an annual community engagement summit hosted by Holt Dynamics. It was detailed. Thorough. Tactically brilliant. And utterly heartfelt. At the end of the document, she had typed a single sentence in bold. We change the world not by who we hire, but by who we choose to see. I looked up at her. You want to name this after me? She shrugged. You signed the checks. I didn't do the work. You gave me the chance to. We stared at each other for a long moment. Then I said something I hadn't planned to say. Add her name too. Your mother. I nodded. She started this. When no one was watching. Serena smiled. That soft, tired, knowing smile of hers. Margaret Holt Foundation, she murmured. It has a ring to it. We broke ground on the new initiative 2 months later. In a small community lot once covered in broken glass and weeds. Now cleared. Leveled. Reborn. Local press showed up. So did partners from community centers, trade schools, shelters, and youth programs. I stood at the podium, prepared to deliver my usual string of numbers, projections, and impact metrics. But when I looked into the crowd, I saw the mailroom clerk with his teenage daughter, the cafeteria cook standing beside her, the young woman in a wheelchair from the college mentorship program. I stopped. And instead, I told them about my mother. About the way she used to tuck chalk behind her ear like it was a sword. About the way she made rice stretch 5 meals without ever letting us feel poor. About the way she taught me to read, not because it was practical, but because she believed stories could save us. And then I told them about Serena. How she fed someone she didn't know. She held my mother's hand when I couldn't. And how, in doing so, she saved more than just a life. She saved a legacy. After the ceremony, I stood beside her as the ribbon was cut. Daniel, now in his first year of college, wheeled up with a wide grin. I told you, he said, you'd change everything. Serena laughed. You were right, kid. He pointed at the plaque on the wall, the Carter Holt Center for Opportunity. You're kind of a big deal now. She rolled her eyes. Don't let it go to your head. But when she looked up at me, her smile was different. Less proud. More settled. Like something had finally landed inside her that had been hovering too long. That night, I returned to my mother's bedside. She didn't speak this time. Just breathed softly. But when I took her hand and whispered what we'd done, what Serena had built, what would carry her name long after we were both gone, her lips moved. One word. Barely audible. Good. And in that single syllable, I heard everything. Forgiveness. Pride. Peace. We spend most of our lives believing legacy is about what we build. But near the end, if we're lucky, we learn it's about what we leave behind for others to carry forward. Not buildings. Not titles. Not balance sheets. But people. Their dignity. Their voice. Their chance to matter. That's what Serena Carter taught me. Not in a seminar. Not in a memo. But in the quiet gesture of wrapping a shawl around my mother's shoulders when the rain wouldn't stop. My mother passed quietly on a Tuesday morning. The nurse told me she'd gone in her sleep, fingers curled gently around a copy of the program from the Carter-Holt Center's ribbon cutting. She never got to walk its halls. But she didn't need to. She knew. We held a small memorial, just family, a few friends, former students, and the staff from the diner where she used to smile at strangers like they were lost children she hadn't met yet. I gave the eulogy. But it was Serena who made people weep. She didn't speak as a colleague. She spoke as a witness. She reminded me of the woman I wish I'd had as a mentor, Serena said. The kind who didn't just teach, but saw you. The kind who made you feel that you were worthy of space even when the world shrank you down. Then she looked at me. And she raised a son who finally stopped running long enough to remember how to love. I had never cried in public before. But I did that day. And I didn't feel weak for it. I felt human. A year later, Serena Carter stood in the executive office of Holt Dynamics. Not as my assistant. Not as a director. But as vice president of corporate strategy and human innovation. The new division was her creation. Her vision. Her design. Under her leadership, the Holt initiative expanded into 9 cities. Over 2,400 employees went through the internal mobility program. 8 formerly overlooked staff members earned director-level roles. The company's turnover rate dropped by 30%. And for the first time in company history, Holt Dynamics was voted one of America's most humane workplaces by a publication that had once accused us of being a glass tower of quiet cruelty. She never let it go to her head. But she let it enter her heart. And that made all the difference. We still shared an office wall. And now and then, I'd hear her laugh through the frosted glass, that low, warm sound that reminded me of soup and firelight and safety. But I had become something else now. Something older. More observant. Less hungry. So I began stepping back. Letting her lead the meetings. Letting her choose the next partnership, the next investment, the next direction. And the more I stepped back, the more people stepped forward toward her. They didn't follow her because she had authority. They followed her because she had gravity. The kind that pulls people toward their better selves. One afternoon, Daniel stopped by the office. Now taller. Confident. A sophomore studying public policy and community design. He wheeled himself beside my desk, dropped his backpack, and grinned. "You miss her yet?" he asked. I raised an eyebrow. "She's 2 doors down." "Not her. I mean the old version of her. The one who thought nobody would ever listen." I smiled. "That version still shows up. Usually in the mirror." Daniel leaned back. "I'm gonna work here one day, you know." "I hope so." He paused, then looked out the window. "She changed my life, you know." "I do." He looked at me. "So did you." I shook my head. "No," I said. "I just made the call." She answered it. That winter, we held the first Margaret Holt Lecture on Equity and Innovation, a new annual tradition at Holt Dynamics. Serena delivered the keynote. The room was packed. And in the back row, I sat beside a janitor named Olivia who had just enrolled in night classes at Morgan State after completing Serena's mentorship program. When Serena began her speech, the room hushed. She told the story of the rain. Of the diner. Of the shawl. She didn't mention my name once. And yet, I had never felt more seen. Then she ended with this. Legacy isn't what we leave behind in marble. It's what we leave behind in memory. And memory lives best in the hands of those who were once invisible, but no longer are. The applause didn't end. Not for a full minute. And for the first time in my life, I stayed seated. Not out of modesty, but because I had learned that real power is knowing when to sit down and let someone else stand. On my last official day at Holt Dynamics, Serena joined me on the roof. Same skyline. Same wind. But everything felt different. She handed me a small box. Inside, a key. Old. Rusted. Lexington Diner, she said with a smile. The owners shut it down last month. Couldn't keep up with the rent. So I bought it. Renovated it. Reopened it. I stared at the key. You turned it into a cafe. She shook her head. I turned it into a community kitchen. Free meals on Sundays. Resume help on Wednesdays. Scholarships named after people like your mom. I blinked slowly. I don't know what to say. She leaned back, looking out at the city. Don't say anything. Just, come visit sometimes. I nodded. I will. We stood there, shoulder to shoulder, as the sun dropped below the edge of the horizon. No ceremony. No farewell party. Just the peace that comes when the baton passes without being forced. A few months later, I walked into the old diner, now the Margaret House. It smelled like it used to. Tomato soup. Fresh bread. Burnt coffee. There was a mural on the far wall, a painting of a woman in a shawl, smiling at a young boy with wide eyes. And beneath it, a plaque. For every stranger who was ever left out in the cold, may you always find a warm booth, a full plate, and someone who sees you. I sat in the back booth. And watched. A young woman handed a tray to a man in a worn jacket. A teenager helped a mother fill out a job application. An elderly couple laughed softly as they shared banana pudding. The place buzzed with life. Not industry. Humanity. And for the first time in years, I closed my eyes. And felt at home. We remember the rain not because it falls, but because someone once stood in it, and reached out anyway. Serena Carter did that. For my mother. For this company. For me. And now. Now, it was the world's turn to remember her. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness leaves the greatest legacy. This story reminds us that dignity, empathy, and human connection matter far more than power or wealth. Serena didn't change the world by holding a title, she changed it by holding someone's hand in the rain. And Raymond didn't become a better leader by building more towers, but by remembering the woman who raised him and choosing to see those the world often overlooks. For those of us in our golden years, it's easy to wonder, did what I do matter? This story answers with a quiet but resounding yes. Our values, our care, our influence, they echo long after we think the world has stopped listening. So if you've ever held a door, shared a meal, or lifted someone when they had no strength left, you've planted a legacy. Let's carry that spirit forward. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of someone you love, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Every voice matters. Every view helps us spread stories that restore faith, honor the unseen, and remind us all, it's never too late to make a difference. Thank you for watching, and for remembering.